Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I read about like 5 to 6 books, about a handful of books this January, and I wanted to talk about some of my favorite ones or ones that I found really interesting. I wanted to just give you some recommendations about maybe something you want to read next, and I want to do the books that I became obsessed with in January because I feel like I haven't really seen much people talk about one of these books. A lot of these books I did read on my Kindle, and they are on Kindle Unlimited. I read about 5 or 6, and I became obsessed with a few of them, and I just can't stop thinking about it. I just want to talk about it. I'm not really going to like spoilers or anything. I just want to explain like how I felt. So let's get started. So the first book I read this month was Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, and I didn't read this because I know a lot of people will read it because of the book of the month. I actually didn't read it because of the book of the month. I read it just because it was free on my Kindle Unlimited. I needed it because I was trying to get over the holidays, like trying to get back into my reading routine after Christmas and New Year's. This was the first book I read after the holidays, and so I wanted like a thriller to pick me up and get me back into reading. And oh my gosh, this book, I thought it was so good. Some people said they didn't really like it because they felt like it was a little choppy, but I felt like the words in the book were so cohesive, and every chapter was a cliffhanger, so it just kept me going and kept me wanting to find more. And they were like good cliffhangers, just like one where you think you know what's gonna happen, and then the cliffhanger happens and you're like, okay, maybe I don't know what's gonna happen. I made a lot of assumptions throughout the book, but the ending was just not what I thought it was gonna be. So the book is pretty much about Adam. He's a screenwriter, and his wife Amelia wins like a raffle to getaway trip to Scotland, and it turns out that they have like marriage issues, and so they think their therapist says that going on this trip will help with their marriage. So they decided to take this trip out to Scotland in like a remote area, and then things just get weird from there. One thing about him too is that he has face blindness, so he's not able to recognize faces, facial features. He just recognizes people by like their smell or how they sound or the colors of the clothes they're wearing, but he can't recognize like who they are, including his own wife. But yeah, I just felt like that was such an interesting synopsis. It really was not what I expected. I kept making assumptions throughout the whole story, and it pretty much goes on about his wife writing him letters which she doesn't show him, that he doesn't read and he doesn't see. I really liked how Alice Feeney ended up writing the story with a cliffhanger on each chapter. I felt like it was really easy to get into because each chapter was a cliffhanger, and when you think something's gonna happen, you read the ending of it and you're like, okay, maybe I don't know what's gonna happen. And she gives perspectives of 3 different characters, so you get a perspective of Amelia, Adam, and then some lady named Robin. And the way she portrays these characters and she explains these characters, you make your own judgments on them, and then you start to create a different perspective on them. And the ending was just really good. I felt like it was a really good book. It actually was eerie sometimes, and it was starting to get really creepy, but not too creepy. I felt like it was just an easy read to fall into. I actually really enjoyed this, and because I read this on my Kindle, I would definitely want to get this as a physical book onto my bookshelf. I kind of just started getting into thrillers, so I don't know if I'm really allowed to say it's one of my favorites, but I definitely counted this as a 5-star read. Okay, so the next book I read was The Grump Next Door by Emma St. Clair and Jenny Proctor. So this is like a rom-com, and I kind of just want like a little lighthearted read. I do have to say, I wouldn't really rate this book as like a really memorable book. I feel like I liked it in the beginning. I actually enjoyed it in the beginning. Near like the middle and the ending, I felt like it was just, I don't know, I couldn't really get into it because the way that the characters like interactions and stuff, it just felt so, to me, it just felt really blunt. I felt like it was hilarious and funny at times, and sometimes it is kind of hard for me to just like laugh out loud when I'm reading a book, but there were some parts of it where it was pretty hilarious, especially in the beginning. I gotta start saying what these stories are about before I start going into them. So the story is about Eloise and Jake, and Eloise, her grandmother ends up passing away, and so she pretty much, they're arranging some funeral services, and they're arranging the renovations for like their home and everything that goes after someone passes, and their lawyer, or his, I believe it's her lawyer, or the grandmother's lawyer, something like that, attorney, in charge of the delegating for the stuff after the grandma passes away. And he also is their next door neighbor. And Eloise ends up being in charge of the renovations, and after grad school and everything, she kind of isn't really doing much with her life other than social media, I believe, and so kind of takes over taking care of the renovations and her grandma's house, and it's like her following her with renovation stuff. The parts I couldn't get into was when she was kind of doing like social media like talk and everything. I don't know, I just couldn't really imagine her with the social media part. Like I just felt like I just wasn't into it, if I'm being 100% honest. But the parts I just couldn't really get into was when surprisingly, when they kind of started like getting together, I felt like it was just kind of, I was a little bit bored. Kind of like all the good parts was in the beginning, and then after the middle and the ending of it, I was just kind of waiting for new things to happen, and not much was really exciting. I do recommend it if you kind of want like a chill light read, but if I'm being 100% honest, I only liked the first half of it, and then after that I just got a little bit bored. So the next story I read was Untainted by Lilian James, and it's about a protagonist named Vera. She is a fighter, and she pretty much is like hidden and stays within this Matherin area. I believe it's called the Matherin Empire, and she stays within this wielding where the soldiers are, and she kind of just wields the swords and everything, but she is taught how to fight. Someone really close to her that kind of took care of her in the book. One day she ends up confronting this guy that kind of comes into the little soldier area. Gosh, I cannot explain things, but she ends up kind of sparring with him and kicking his booty, and it turns out to be the prince. She ends up sparring with him to confront him and to kind of protect her people. He ends up having a huge part of like why she needs to come back to the castle with him. But the thing about her is that she's not human. She has to pretend to be human, but she's actually, I believe she's Fae. They're like rivals, so like their species are rivals, like humans, and if she is Fae, then Fae. She ends up having to just pretend to be human and kind of hide it when there's so much more to her, and she finds out finding about her history and her family past, about this ancient power that she has within her. But I found it like fast-paced. It kind of just was going, like, I didn't ever feel like it was just slow. Okay, this doesn't really happen often when the protagonist gets with someone. Normally I'm like, okay, yeah, I like that they're getting with this person. The person she got with, I wasn't cheering on for him. I was cheering on for someone else. I was like, aw, like, I wasn't shipping them being together. I just didn't think they were going to end up together. And I don't know, I just felt like it kind of moved too fast-paced. When there's a romance, I don't like when it just moves fast-paced. I like when it's just like a slow burn and it just takes time. In terms of fighting and defending herself, like, yeah, she was a pretty great woman role model. But there were certain things that she did that I just didn't fully agree with, and some of her actions, because I wanted like an atmospheric magical read. And if I'm being 100% honest, I didn't really feel like I got much of the atmosphere around it, but I think it's because I was just looking for that at the time. This is like a good book in terms of when it comes to fighter women. I felt like it was really good. Like, they portrayed her really great. But yeah. Okay, so this next book, called Frost by C. and Crawford, and I feel like I haven't really been seeing a lot of people do reviews on this book. I heard it's good, but I don't really see a lot of them, like when I was looking up on BookTube and everything. Oh my gosh, this book is so good. This book is so good. I really liked it. Like I said, I was looking for an atmospheric read, and so I read this after Untainted, and this book gave atmospheric vibes and all so much more. Okay, so this book is a fae romance. The protagonist, her name is Ava, and there's a King Torin. Long story short, the synopsis goes that she came home, found her boyfriend cheating on her with a human woman, and Ava is a fae. She's living amongst this like human modern world, and she likes it. Like, she actually enjoys it. This part of the book kind of reminded me, if you've ever read A Touch of Darkness, it kind of reminded me of that a little bit, about her liking living in the modern world when she was actually something else. And that was Ava. And she became drunk, belligerent, and semi-homeless, not having any money or anywhere to live. And she goes to this bar. And when she goes to this bar, this Seelie King, aka Torin, he comes in, and she ends up kind of just, I guess, like belligerently talking to him, and it's on live national TV. And might I add that there's this whole competition going on with, it's like a competition of princesses. I guess it's kind of like The Bachelor type thing. I've never watched The Bachelor, but it's like that, where they're competing to be with the king to like a reason that they can't really say, but they have to fight in a competition. I guess it's like traditional that the fae princesses will compete against one another to get the place of the throne. Yeah, I didn't think I was gonna like this book as much, because I'm honestly, when it comes to like action reads, I like them, but sometimes I feel like the action part's a little bit too much. This one was a perfect balance. It was a perfect balance of romance. I loved the interaction she had with the other princesses. I just love when like women support one another, and in the book there was this one part that I really liked with the princess, and they kind of just worked together, and I was like, wow, I like that. And the romances were so cute. It was definitely a slow burn, and the atmosphere was so good. It kind of took place in near like the castle of the Seelie King, the Seelie Kingdom. Oh my gosh, I didn't even say what this book is about. So pretty much she like belligerently yells at him, and she ends up causing a fool of herself on national TV during the same time they're doing this whole princesses competition type thing, and kind of leads into like where they kind of use each other. So they kind of work with one another. So in a way, he kind of offers her some money, which she desperately kind of needs, and he ends up not wanting to originally get married. So they have to like charade as they're kind of like working together so that she can try to win the throne in this marriage that he originally doesn't want to. He doesn't want to get into a marriage. He doesn't, because of certain reasons. It gets into that a lot. So when she ends up going to these competitions, she finds out how brutal and harsh they are. And she learns more about the traditional like acts of the Fae world that she wasn't a part of. She also never knew her real parents. She was raised by a human within the modern world, and starts to uncover all these things about her past life and herself. And okay, like you would think him being in this competition, he wouldn't give her like you wouldn't get this romance that you right. Okay, so you think that reading this when they're in the competition with all these princesses, he wouldn't be giving her like this proper attention, if that makes sense, when it comes to like a romance read. The way he treated her, I thought it was so sweet. It was really respectful too. Sometimes they kind of like bicker, and I just find those parts so hilarious when they like bicker. It was almost like an enemy to lovers type of book because they just didn't really agree, but they end up helping each other out a lot. And the way he worries for her, I just felt like it was such a sweet read. Yeah, and also the atmosphere was so interesting. I loved it. I love it when it takes place within. It was also cool to hear about the other Fae kingdoms and the type of princesses they were from the different types of world. Like there was the water one, the earth one, the fire one, I believe. I just felt like it was really cool to like hear about the different types of kingdoms. It was like a reality show. Like it was like a reality show with like these Faes, and really interesting too because when they talked about like when the author wrote the atmosphere of the world, I love atmospheric reads. I love environmental like descriptive words about how it is in the environment. Like I love how she explained how cold it was, and she explained the castle in the book. I just kept picturing Hogwarts, like the dark kind of like eerie but like regal halls of Hogwarts. I just felt like it was a really, really good read. There were some really cool parts in it too that I was just like, wow, okay, this is really good. And what's crazy is that the next book is called Ambrosia, I believe, comes out February 20th to buy physically, but if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's gonna come out on there. So I'm so excited to read the second one. Normally when it comes to second books though, I get a little sus sometimes because I've noticed that like the first books are always great, and then after the books they start to kind of trail. It's just, they're not as good, but I'm hoping it will be because there's just so much more that just it needs to be answered in the next book. Like this book ended on a cliffhanger. So yeah, I really like this book a lot. I found this book to be one of my favorites, and it's a 5 out of 5 star read for me for sure. So the next book, this is definitely a 5 out of 5 star read for me. I also feel, I'm ashamed to say this, but this is my first Colleen Hoover book I've read. I've been pulling off for a while just because I don't know. I just wanted to get through some books first, but I understand the Colleen Hoover hype. I get it now. This book as a mom, oh my gosh, this pulled on my heartstrings. I don't cry on books. I just don't. Yeah, this book was like, I bawled like a baby while my baby was napping next to me. So you can't really go much into the synopsis without spoiling anything. But long story short, it's pretty much about this woman named Kenna, and she spent 5 years in prison for a mistake that she deeply regrets. And she goes back to the town where there's a lot of just things from her past. And she goes there because she has a 4-year-old daughter. She has a 4-year-old daughter that she wants to be reunited with. And of course, due to what happened, she doesn't have a lot of people there for her anymore. So the one person that actually hasn't shut her out is this bar owner named Ledger. And I just felt like it was, the way she wrote the story, it was just so cohesive. You could tell there's so much like tension between them, but there's so much like forbiddable, like, I don't even know if that's a word, but it's just like, yeah, like where her main intention was to be reunited with her daughter, and she doesn't want to do anything. She doesn't want to do anything to stop that. She really does try to fight for her daughter. And when you read this book, you just kind of see and you start to feel what she's feeling and going through what she's going. I didn't particularly as a character. As a character, I wouldn't say she's my favorite, but in terms of trying to relate to how she's been feeling, it just pulled on my heartstrings. This book was just so emotionally, like, it just pulled so much emotions out of me, and I just was like really shocked. I don't really cry on books, like I said, so for this book to make me cry, I was shocked. There's just so much in it, and it was just interesting. Everything was cohesive. It never felt slow. I never felt meh about it. I felt like all of it was really, it was just not what I expected. And I think when I read the reviews, a lot of people said they were thinking it was going to be a certain type of book going into this, but definitely not what they expected. I feel like you can even get into this whether or not you have a child or not. It was a book that definitely just, it will pull strings within your soul and your body and probably make you cry. So yeah, this is a 5-star out of 5-star read. This is for sure a book I want to have on my bookshelf physically along with Frost. Okay, so the last book I read was Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. So the synopsis was really interesting. It's a cafe that it has a legend that you can go back in time before the coffee gets cold, and you can travel back in time, but there are rules that you must follow, and you have to follow them. And it follows 4 people in 4 different perspectives. Overall, I feel like this was a good book. I feel like I didn't give it justice though, because if I'm being 100% honest, my mind wasn't into reading this type of story at the very moment, but I have this thing where I just feel like I have to finish a book. I liked it, I liked the synopsis, and I feel like it's a book I definitely would like, but because my mind was so consumed with wanting to make this channel, I was just trying to think of ideas and get my channel started. I really fully put my attention to this book. But in terms of this book, the writing wasn't really my most favorite. I felt like it felt a little scripted, if that makes sense, like with the characters, like their movements and what they do. I felt like it was a little scripted from how it sounds. Some might like that, but for me, I personally don't fully like that. The story and the way that the author connected it all, I felt like it was so endearing. I felt like it was really sweet, and it's one of those books that you read that you really reflect on when it comes to life, and I feel like this is a really good read. I just feel like I should have gave it a better justice, so I'm probably gonna reread this again. But overall, yeah, so like I would probably just not really dock it the best because I didn't really care for how they scripted the characters. I felt like sometimes I was just like a little bit bored, or I was lost sometimes. And in general though, when it came to their dialogue, I felt like the dialogue was hard for me to follow. The storyline in general was really cute. I think I was just looking for something kind of like reflective and cozy. I wanted something with like a coffee shop, and it does deliver that, but in a certain sense. It was a good book overall though. Yeah, so that's it for the books I read in January. I feel like really proud. I found some 5-star reads and some books I definitely want to purchase in person, and I really hope some of those books end up being your favorite. If not, then hopefully I hope you find your favorites next few months or your whole life. I hope you find good books your whole life. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to me talk about all these books, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.